Exactly. I have to take mine off. I was going to put it on when we got to the spot. Good evening and welcome. I'd like to call the regular council meeting of Wednesday, June 7th to order. It's just exactly 7 p.m. and we have an agenda that was circulated with the call to order. Of course, there's also the reminder that if any of the councillors have a conflict of interest or bias that affects their judgment on any of the issues, that they will declare that at the appropriate time. And then to move directly to adoption of the agenda, which is has been circulated. Are there any additions or deletions to that agenda? We have an amended agenda. Yeah, we do have an amended agenda to make sure everyone knows that, so that the delegate is on. In that case, we'll no additions or deletions. A motion to adopt the agenda as amended, as circulated as amended. Thank you, Councillors Seegers and Councillor Lutz. All those in favor? That's carried. Then we will move to the delegations from the Seniors Planning Table. Very pleased to have Alison with us tonight and to give us just a brief introduction to a report on a project that they've undertaken over the last 8 to 9 months, actually. Welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you very much. It's an honor to be here, and I was thinking, how do I summarize something that I finished 2 or 3 months ago? And it's such a short period of time. So what I wanted to do is just, I don't have slides, I just wanted to say a few things, mostly thanks. Mr. Mayor, Councillor, staff, and community members. I've been very blessed to be part of to be the part-time coordinator of the Seniors Planning Table on the Sunshine Coast for the last 2 years, and I'm very pleased to publicly present our draft age-friendly community plan for the District of Sechelt to you and the community this evening. Many of you will know that the Seniors Planning Table is a program of the Community Resource Centre, and that's the organization that also delivered the Progress Plan, which identified the need for a Seniors Planning Table on the Sunshine Coast. I wanted to, on behalf of the Planning Table, thank you for the opportunity to produce this draft plan for your consideration and on your behalf. We greatly appreciate the support of planners Angela, Andre, Mike, and Aaron, and also from Connie in communications along the way. Thanks also for the numerous recent proclamations of the various special days, weeks, and months that I know have been getting proclaimed, and the opportunity to be here during BC Seniors Week. Very, very fitting, so thank you for that. These proclamations do enable organizations and individuals in our community to attach events and actions and activities to raise awareness of things like the need for even more intergenerational connection, increased accessibility, prevention of abuse of older adults, and the recognition of the huge contribution that seniors make to our community. So it's great that we have these proclamations, and I'm hopeful that we can carry on having those from year to year. You probably know from having had a chance to read the Age-Friendly Community Plan that we did 8 focus groups between April and September 2016, and we reached approximately 208 participants, both people serving seniors as well as citizens in the community, many of whom were seniors, although we did, thanks to feedback from Darnelda, actually organize where we did focus groups somewhat differently to be able to reach people who are not just seniors, because an age-friendly community is a community that works for all of us. The recommendations, of which there are 43, I didn't know that till now, I had to just count them, have been developed to enable a wide variety of agencies and organizations to take action, and for the most part all those organizations have been talked with about the recommendations, so they should not be a big surprise to people. And deliberately were constructed in a way to be actionable so that we don't have a report that sits on a shelf that, can be the case at times. So I know you've had a chance to review the age-friendly community plan in draft, and tonight you're going to have an opportunity as part of your business meeting to be able to receive, review, and endorse it. There's just a few things that I wanted to just comment on about it. First of all, the District of Sechelt has a lot going for it. That's very clear, and I did start every section with what are some of the strengths of the community, and I know that I probably didn't list all of them, but just was trying to really acknowledge that. And this community has also been the recipient of an award for being doing three very successful age-friendly projects before this one. I wanted to also comment on and thank the focus group participants. People were very happy to be consulted, are willing to do that again, and they also are really looking forward to seeing more actions. And I've seen things beginning to happen that may have been in the works already, but things that have been happening since the report was completed. As I mentioned, what we heard and the recommendations will benefit everyone, and I think that's what seniors want. They don't want special treatment. They just want, from what I've been hearing, they just want everybody to be, included and valued for who they are. I was really struck, and it is why I work here, and some of you have heard me say this before, about how people want even more neighborliness and interconnectedness and intergenerational opportunities to connect in the community as a way of maintaining health and wellness. That really came out as a really significant theme that I heard in every setting. Also, people are, and no surprise to any of you, very concerned about the lack of affordable housing, very concerned about homelessness, and so I am hopeful that the council will seriously entertain the idea of developing an affordable housing strategy here and with partners on the coast. The community is also very, very engaged. People give a lot, seniors give a lot, and I think there's also recognition that if we all do our part. That really kind of came through to me loud and clear as well. And another theme was that people really want to see collaboration between local governments, between all levels of government. Locally, I think I speak on behalf of the Resource Center and the Planning Table in saying that we really need a dedicated community social planning position. And a moderately supported seniors planning table. Provincially, we need a social policy framework for supporting the work we do locally that is in the works being developed by Board Voice, provincial nonprofit executive directors. And nationally, we need a seniors strategy, national senior strategy, which I think is also in the works. So none of us are alone, and I just really want to thank you for the opportunity to do this project for you, and to thank the Seniors Planning Table and members of the community for contributing. I wish you well in your deliberations later this evening, and I'm happy to answer any questions about the draft plan tonight or in the future. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that succinct report on a very good report. When I was reading the report, I was thinking how fortunate we are in Sechelt to have you in our community, to be able to not only organize the research and the data, but to write reports of that caliber. It's really well written and nicely easy to follow. Well, I'm sure there's a lead author. Councillors have any questions? We will turn to it as a business item. I was not quite sure what the word, I missed an opportunity when it was first coming forward. I didn't realize it probably should have come to a committee of the whole meeting, like we didn't have this afternoon. So there could be like a 40 or 45-minute discussion, because there's an awful lot there. As a business item later tonight, it'll be much shorter than that. And as a delegation, it's much shorter, but I didn't quite grasp what was coming forward when it did 2 weeks ago. So I'm sorry about that, but we will be getting into it, if not tonight, in future as we follow up on it. Anything else from council? We'll wait till it's a business item. Thank you very much for that, and it won't be too much longer as we go through. We have two proclamations, and to echo Alison's comments, proclamations are important, even though they do seem to be just sometimes pro forma at the beginning of a meeting, because they do give an opportunity to recognize a number of things. And I noticed a proclamation from 3 weeks ago ended up in an advertisement in the local this week. Surprised me. Children and Youth in Care Week, June 5 to 11. Whereas there are over 7,000 children and youth in the care of the province, and whereas Child and Youth in Care Week is a time for communities across the province to stand in support and celebration of our province's incredible, diverse young people in government care, and whereas Youth in Care have advocated for the week to celebrate the diversity and accomplishments of their peers and raise public awareness about the challenges they face, now, therefore, I, Bruce Milne, do hereby proclaim that June 5th to the 11th, 2017, shall be known as Child and Youth in Care Week in the District of Sechelt. And I understand there were some gifts brought for council or the community. Not all councillors will share in sweets. Thank you for that. And the second proclamation this evening is on World Elder Abuse Awareness Day. Whereas throughout the world, abuse and neglect of older persons is largely under-recognized, and whereas World Elder Abuse Awareness Day has been established in support of the United Nations International Plan of Action, which recognizes the significance of elder abuse as a social issue, and whereas citizens, community organizations, and public officials all have vital roles in working together and sharing information on how to prevent abuse and to recognize signs of abuse and neglect in our elders, now therefore I, Bruce Milne, Mayor, do proclaim that June 15th, 2017 shall be known as World Elder Abuse Awareness Day in the District of Sechelt. And moving to the adoption of minutes from previous meetings, first the minutes of the 3 p.m. regular council meeting, page 5-6, just a motion to adopt. Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers, all those in favor? That's carried. And minutes of item 5.2, minutes of the 7 p.m. meeting of May 17th, which is page 7 through to 18, a motion to adopt. Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers. Any errors or omissions in those minutes? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Sorry, thank you. On page 12 in recommendation number 6, I believe we've had some correspondence with regards to the makeup of the ICSP Advisory Committee. There's been a recommendation or a request to add a member from Telecom Bay Community Association to that group. Is it a way to do this in this meeting before we actually adopt these?
I'm going to address some business arising from this because we failed to appoint the council liaison, and if a councillor wanted to make a motion, I guess at that time as business arising to amend the list, we could see if it was seconded and discussed.
Okay, and then
any errors or omissions in the minutes?
Yes, I think I found something
as opposed to business
arising. Yes, on page 17. Under 11.3, the appointment of the director and alternate. I believe it was June 1st through December 1st.
Oh, yes.
Rather than September 31st for both of those.
Thank you for catching that. It's actually not the 31st either.
No, December 1st, right?
December 1st.
Yeah, June 1st through December 1st. Okay, that was the only error then. Thank you.
Or November 30th. Yeah. They have to be in place before the first meeting in December. So if this one stays through until December 1st, that should be okay. So thank you for that amendment. Any other amendments? All those in favor of adoption as amended? That's carried. Those amendments. And minutes of the special council meeting. Item 5.3, a motion to receive and adopt. Councillor Lutz, Councillor Wright, thank you. Any errors or omissions in that meeting. And we have, okay, any business arising from those minutes? And I would note on page 14, the resolution on establishing the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee, that when we did that business item at the time, there was also a recommendation to have council liaison appointments. And I thought we should, just for ease, appoint the planning chair and vice chair as the main liaison and alternate, and see how that worked going forward, because we didn't discuss it at the time. So that would be one business arising. I think it would be Noel. I need a motion for that appointment. And Councillor Wright will make that motion. Seconded by Councillor Seegers. All in favor? And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. Yes, we've had some correspondence with regards to the formation in terms of reference of the ICSP Advisory Committee. And Telecom Bay is requesting that they have a delegation or a delegate member on this committee as well, so that they can represent their interests. So I'd like to put forward a motion that the Telecom Bay Community Association has a member appointed to be on the Integrated Community Sustainability Plan Advisory Committee. And I'm looking for a second.
Councillor Lutz, Councillor Inkster. Is it a registered community association? I don't think so. It's 16 people that have called themselves an association and meet on occasion, but it's not registered. And we had 3 different letters of different groups wanting to join this, just for that. So discussion of the motion that's on the floor. It is called, that's the correct word though, the correct name is Telecom Bay Community Association or Neighborhood? Neighborhood. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Neighborhood Association. Councillor Mueller.
So my comments on this one are regards to the makeup of the advisory committee. We discussed this at a previous time. We discussed the size of this committee becoming unwieldy. However, in this instance, we've had 3 others. Groups have self-selected saying that they'd like to be a part of it, and I'm just curious if this wasn't the place, where else would that be? I'm not entirely familiar with the entire process of an ICSP development, and I want to make sure there's a mechanism. If it's not here, somewhere else, I assume this is going to have a number of series of public engagements as well, and just to make sure that all voices are heard. This is a somewhat limiting list. However, that's only because of the dynamics of groups, and chairing such a large committee is difficult. I think it would be a shame to lose another voice. So if they were willing.
I'll ask staff to correct me if I'm wrong, but this is much more of a steering committee than the public advisory committee. There's going to be numbers of ways to engage the community, but we do need a steering committee that will siphon through the material that comes through and discuss it at another level as the reports are being made.
Thank you, Your Worship. You're absolutely correct. That is the intention of this, is, as you say, steer the process. This whole plan has a considerable amount of public engagement to reach various groups, and certainly any group that shows an interest in being heard, we would reach out to them and make sure they are heard.
Mm-hmm. Any other discussion? Councillor Mueller.
I guess just as a follow-up to that, maybe it makes sense, since we've been asked actually for a bunch of different additions, if we kind of look at them all together. Does that make sense? I know that wasn't the motion, but if you're going to include one at this stage, you may as well be considering the others as well.
I think that's a good point. For the record, I'm not in favor of this motion. I would vote against it just because of the numbers and because the neighborhood associations are well recognized. The OCP actually doesn't refer to these as standalone organizations whatsoever. It's a part of a neighborhood, and there's several communities in that neighborhood, just as there are in Davis Bay. There's Selma Park, there's Davis Bay, there's Wilson Creek, and sub areas of that, but we don't have representation from every one of those. They're all mentioned in the OCP. Similarly, West Sechelt has almost 2,000 people, but we don't in fact have sub-neighborhoods and groups from Northwest Bay Road, which is, we know, a distinct community, a distinct neighborhood. So I just don't think it's, I understand why people want to be involved. I think that's good, but I think there'll be places for that. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I know that we have Sandy Hook and we have Tawanik, and Silicon Bay have come forward and say, we're not Sandy Hook, we're not Tawanik, and we'd like to have a voice at the table, and that's why I put it forward.
Any further discussion? All those in favor? And that's carried. And there will be one name added, plus the councillor liaisons. Any other business arising from the minutes of any of our meetings? Then we go to the item 7.1, minutes of the Planning and Community Development Committee meeting of May 24th. First, a motion to receive. Thank you, Councillor Wright, Councillor Seegers. Any errors or omissions? Guess we don't need to look at that. Let's just go to any recommendations need to be pulled out of this. Councillor Seegers.
Number 13, please.
Okay.
And then I do have a couple of errors.
Okay. Number 13 is actually a defeated motion, so I'm not really sure how we pull these out, but our practice has always been, just so the community knows in public, is when we set up the committee structure with only four councillors on it, it was meant to be efficient, but it was not meant to be a way to allow majorities to override minority voices. So if one person on a committee just was voted down, so it was a 3-1 split, that one person could come to council and potentially have 3 other councillors who aren't on the committee join them for a 4-3 split, reversing it at council level. So we've always, as practice, wanted to adopt that opportunity for motions that, even though they're defeated, to come forward, but they have to be pulled out and made notice of that. So that's 13. Anything else? First, let's see if there's any corrections that we need to make. Councillor Seegers?
Yes, page 26, under recommendation 6D, just some wording. We register a restrictive covenant. I think it should be over the property and on lot B, blocks 1 to 3.
Or on the property. Yeah.
Or on the property,
And on, yeah.
on the property.
We just have an extra word under.
6D.
Yes.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah. It's page 6 of the Planning Committee report
Recommendation 6.
and recommendation 6. And it's item D, item D. We don't want to register a restrictive covenant under and on, just on, that's all. Yep. Okay. Councillor Wright?
Thank you, Your Worship. I don't have a correction. I have just a comment on 3.1, Habitat for Humanity. I just came from their annual general meeting, and one of the board members informed me that they will be pouring concrete either tomorrow or Friday, depending on the availability of concrete. And that's good news. Thank you.
Okay. So we need a motion to approve the recommendations on page 4 of their report. Recommendations 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 15, 16, which is the Habitat for Humanity one, and 17 and 18. Councillor Seegers, and seconded by Councillor Lutz. Thank you. Any discussion of those items? All those in favor? That's carried. Thank you very much. And now, Councillor Seegers, a motion for council to consider recommendation number 13, Trellis Senior Services, recommendation number 13 of the meeting of May 24th. Okay. Thank you, Councillor Seegers. Is there a seconder for that? second for discussion. Councillor Mueller has seconded it. And while I'm on items 13 and 14, 14 was defeated as well. Just as a matter of process, 14 probably should have come before 13. You could have had a motion to table something, which was defeated, and then gone on to look at the motion itself. In this case, it looks like you looked at the motion, defeated it, and then went to a motion to table it or defer it somewhere. So just in terms of when we're going through those, I know it was a complex meeting where we were trying to get lots of things done on it, but once it's tabled, it's tabled. Once it's defeated, it can't come back to be tabled anywhere or deferred. So on the floor is recommendation that staff be authorized to draft an official community plan amendment bylaw to change the future land use designation of a portion of district lots 1384 and 4295A from residential and multifamily mixed residential to civic institutional utilities, and authorized to draft 2, a zoning bylaw amendment to create a new comprehensive development zone to support a facility with 128-bed long-term residential care beds, 4 hospice beds, and an adult daycare. So discussion. Councillor Mueller first, and then
Yes, thank you. I guess I would just like to reiterate to council kind of what the discussion was, and my particular reason why I voted against this. There was a three-part recommendation that asked us to direct staff to develop a long-term policy regarding the whole issue of civic institutional developments, and then there was 2 others directing staff to draft these amendments and move towards a public hearing and a first reading. However, just before the meeting itself, council may not know this, is that the applicant actually requested to have this pulled. But we received it in the last hour, and we took it anyways, and we ran with it. I was just wanting to ask staff if we've received any more information about that, why it was pulled. That was one of the reasons why I voted against it. I didn't think we should be moving ahead an application necessarily that didn't have the full support of the applicant.
Mr. Stewart.
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, the proponents have gotten in touch with us. They didn't really provide specifics. They simply said that they had concerns with the report and wanted an opportunity to discuss them with us prior to it moving forward. So I haven't been getting any specifics as to what their concerns were at this point.
And anything else from staff?
Well, Your Worship, just further to that, I did have a conversation with the applicant this previous Friday afternoon, and you know, basically further to what Mr. Stewart said, they believe that they would have some further information they would like to add to the report, and some areas where they have a different perspective on the OCP than that of what staff has in terms of some of the amendments that we see coming forward. I think at this point the applicant understands that there'll be other opportunities down the road to present to council, so they have not submitted anything further to us at this time.
We all did get a letter this afternoon, though, this morning.
Oh, I didn't know that. Okay.
It went to council, so I imagine it's gone to staff as well, some staff. Yeah.
So just
And
as a
Mr.
follow-up,
Councillor Mueller.
because I won't be speaking twice on the same issue. That sounds to me like a situation where we're attempting to change a report coming from staff on a very material issue, an issue that matters a lot to us. That's the OCP, and councillors do not have that privilege, neither do proponents. So hearing that, my interest would be that this remains defeated and that we do not move this forward until we get some clarity.
Thank you for that. And Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. This was staff's recommendation that we give them authorization to draft these plans at this point. I believe they were looking at doing this in conjunction with the amendments to the OCP wording. So this would actually be a test case to be able to clarify on a real application that's in front of us how this would move forward. This is only the beginning of this. We do need to have community input. We do need to have our staff look at this in depth, but we need to actually give a signal that we are willing to look at this and engage the community in this project. So I'd like to see this start the process here at council and start it moving forward. It will come back to us with input from community and from the proponents I'm sure everybody's going to wade in on this one, but I would like to see it start moving forward.
Any other discussion from council? I see Councillor Wright and Councillor Lutz. Councillor Lutz was first. Yeah, Councillor Lutz.
Thank you. I too want this recommendation to remain defeated. I think that we have to have the community conversation first around what the changes will look like in the OCP, not move this forward and make the OCP fit it. To me, that's backwards. So I will again defeat this recommendation.
And Councillor Wright, not on your own, you won't defeat it, but just a small point, but Councillor Wright.
But with help, you might. Thank you, Your Worship. I'd like to see this move forward, but my reluctance here is we're going to start flying by the seat of our pants here. And every time that council does this and starts trying to change a report on the fly, we get ourselves into a real mess. And it was defeated. I'm going to vote against it. Let it go back to staff. Let the staff bring us the report with the correct information, and then we can have a look at it. And that way, we've got a recommendation from staff that says, this is what we recommend you should do. And we're not flying by the seat of our pants, making these changes on the fly, forgetting what we did, and then changing it at the next meeting. And I just cannot accept that way of doing business. Thank you.
Any further discussion before Councillor Seegers speaks again? Councillor Inkster?
Yeah, I think we should just leave this as is, look at the OCP first before an application comes forward and triggers that discussion. If you look at the district of Sechelt and the proposed location in West Sechelt, you will note that the West Sechelt is probably one of the most clearly designated single-family residential areas in Sechelt. So to look at placing this particular proposal and size density development in the middle of the single family proposal when we've drafted and put together and passed the OCP, it seems that we're jumping way ahead and in contradiction of our OCP. So we need to consider that. It's very clearly a large single family residential area, very separate from other areas of Sechelt which have commercial and residential in close proximity. Thank you.
Anyone else like to speak? And Councillor Seegers, your turn.
Thank you. I'd like to address both of the last two councillors' points. Councillor Wright indicated that we should wait for staff to come forward with the recommendation. This was the recommendation from staff. We didn't change any of the wording. This is what they brought forward to us, and it was discussed at the meeting. So we wouldn't be changing anything on the fly. We'd be actually accepting the recommendation that staff brought to us. With regards to Councillor Inkster's comments, yes, this is primarily a single-family community, community neighborhood in West Sechelt, and many of those community members are going to want to stay in their community. So I would like this to be a conversation that the community has, and it will only start the conversation when we at this table make a decision to have our staff move it forward. Otherwise, that conversation won't take place. Yes, there will be discussion around the OCP and the terminology and the wording in the OCP, but this project that has come forward to us needs to have that time in the public eye, and it won't get that, again, until we here say, yes, move it forward. So I would like to see council step up and move this forward. Thanks.
And Councillor Mueller, then
Thanks.
Councillor
I
Wright,
guess
and then Councillor Lutz.
we're doing rebuttals today.
Okay. We're having a full discussion today.
Anybody who's reading the paper recently will recall that there were three major developments that came through this chambers here, got to third and fourth reading, and returned back because there was new information coming after the public hearing. And this is, again, a complex project, one requiring an OCP amendment, one that will likely require many surveys, all to be taken into account. That's something that we're going to be better at in the future. We're going to collect all the information and do it once, not 2 and 3 times. So I'm in favor of doing this. It actually, to go ahead and just shunt an application into our process and get it, to first reading, that's kind of and to public hearing, that's a bit of a false milestone, because we know that we have to look at all the information at one time and make an informed decision. So in this particular case, they're not ready. The applicant said they're not ready. So I think it's pretty clear that it shouldn't be going ahead in this manner.
Councillor Lutz.
We've all seen the control sheet of the developments that are in front of our staff. And to add this workload before we've had the community conversation is, to me, overload, because it is going to have to sit in a holding pattern while we go through the community development of what our community thinks an institution should look like and where it should be. To go ahead and say yes to this and start that process before the first conversation has taken place, it's not on. I don't think we're being fair to the people who want to build it or to our staff. So I will continue to vote against this recommendation.
And Councillor Wright.
Well, thank you, Your Worship. Today we received a 2-page email from the proponent. Now we're looking at a report that was a week old, and now we have another 2 pages that we have to consider as council. I don't know whether everybody at the council table has read it. I don't think staff have read it, and I don't know how that impacts a report that we wrote a week ago. If you start considering this now without that email and any other changes that come down the pipe, it's bad business. Thank you.
Okay, new commentary, and then we'll try and wrap it
And
up.
then I won't say anymore.
We don't want people not to say things, but we want it to be new and fresh.
All this motion does is request that staff draft some bylaws. And inside of that, they will need to consider all of the information that's come forward now, so that we're not saying at this point, we are going to support the bylaw that they're bringing forward. We're saying, please go ahead and start drafting it so that they can consider the information and bring something to us to be able to take to the community.
Okay. People consider their opinions? All those in favor of the motion? Any opposed to the motion? And that's defeated tonight. Thank you for the discussion. Moving to item 7.2, minutes of the Public Works, Parks and Environment Committee. Motion to receive and adopt. Thank you, Councillor Wright and Lutz. And any errors or omissions or items you would like to pull out of this? Councillor Wright.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Going to the bottom of page 35, I don't believe I was the chair of that particular meeting.
38.
Yes. Okay. Yeah. When we get to signing that off for the minutes. Okay.
3-page numbers.
Yeah. For the amendments, because there's 3 pages of delegations. Yeah. Any items we'd like to pull out of this? Hearing none, I'd look for a motion to adopt recommendations 1, 2, 3. Is there 2 3s? Unfortunately. 4, 5, 6. There should be 6 recommendations. Okay. Meaning, thank you, Councillor Seegers, and seconded by Councillor Wright. All those in favor? That's carried. Oh. And business, right? Another item? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. So it'd be page 36, I believe. Just a note to staff that we indicated at that meeting that the report on the BC bike race be forwarded directly to council due to the time sensitivity. That's on page 36, I believe.
It's
on
recommendation number 2.
Recommendation number 2.
Just so it doesn't go to committee but comes directly to council. Recommendation number 2.
Okay, thank you.
That's what staff does on Thursday mornings after our meetings. They go through all of this, read all the items, make sure they do it. Okay. Moving along then to new business, and the first one is 10.1, which is municipal contract policing resource request, and this is the letter of approval. First, a motion to receive the report and letter of approval. Thank you, Councillor Seegers and Councillor Shanks. All those in favor? It's fairly straightforward. Do you want to speak to it? Is there anything you'd like to speak to on this?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yeah, this is simply a request to send a letter to the RCMP. It's really, as a letter in principle for the 2018-2019 resource request. The federal government wants this for planning purposes only. We're not bound by this decision. They would want us to confirm the numbers next April in 2018. But at this point, as indicated in the report, I haven't been given any indication that there was desire to increase the RCMP complement at this point, so we haven't changed the complement request.
Thank you. And I do have a question on your letter to Mr. Pecknold and signed by you, which is the second page of the report. The municipal cost for the integrated team, total integrated team, Sechelt. Now, do you happen to know, and you may not know, is that a 70% share, or is that actually allocated on a different formula among the Lower Mainland and Sechelt?
Your Worship, it's actually a different formula. It's the total integrated team budget is allocated among all the RCMP detachments based on a prorated share.
But so we pay 100% of our...
Actually, I can't answer whether the federal government pays E-Division. We don't pay this directly. The E-Division incurs these costs and simply invoices us. So I don't know if it's a 100% invoice recovery or not.
Okay, Councillor Inkster.
Yeah, it's interesting. I had actually done a figure of the percentage of the overall budget that's gone to integrated. I think it's 13% or something like that really quickly. And it would be good to know, question that particular figure all the time it comes up, and to determine what and how they come up with that amount, because as I've mentioned over a number of years, it's always a question how much we use the integrated. I always ask that question in terms of, they always say it takes 1 or 2 incidences or even 3 to use up your budget, but if you look at the District of Sechelt over the last number of years, we generally don't use integrated, if maybe dog and or major accident. So it's they call it an insurance policy, but it's a $187,000 insurance policy that they bill us with.
We also use it for undercover, for drug. It's used quite, and it may be, and which? Well, yeah, a major incident. It may be the kind of thing that we contribute as part of our public share, but I'm just curious how they, I know it's of some dispute in the Lower Mainland as well. Okay, so then we go to the second recommendation. Oh, sorry, unless there's more discussion.
We could almost have 2 more members with that amount, so anyway.
Councillor Seegers, thank you for moving the second recommendation, and Councillor Wright, all those in favor? That's carried. So did we do both? We received the letter of approval and we've authorized staff to send it. Okay. And we move then to item 10.2, which is a report from the municipal planner. Let's move both of those recommendations, given that she's not here to speak to it. Councillor Lutz and Councillor Seegers, that the report I imagine that's an incomplete sentence as well. First recommendation, thank you, we'll fix that it be received, and that staff bring forward amendments to align the development application process. Any discussion of that? All those in favor? It's carried. Item 10.3, the age-friendly community plan. First, a motion to receive, Councillor Lutz and Seegers. All those in favor? And again, the planner isn't here. Is the director prepared to speak to this report? Okay. I'll look to you to speak to it.
Thank you, Your Worship. I won't say too much about this. It was obviously covered during the delegation this evening. Essentially, staff are now bringing this report forward for Council's consideration and basically endorsement, and for it to have staff consider what's in the report when we're looking at any bylaw and policy reviews. And finally, to have us pass this report on to the outside bodies that were mentioned in the report for their recommendations.
Okay. Can I have somebody move recommendations 2 and 3? Councillor Wright, Councillor Inkster. And discussion. I'm actually going to come back with another recommendation, just so council knows, but let's start with discussion. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I did notice that there were a number of organizations and bodies that it was requested we would forward this to. I didn't necessarily see our MP and our MLA. So I'd like those to be added as well, that they get forwarded to them. Okay.
They are in the list or not?
They weren't specifically
I see
mentioned.
people
I don't believe.
nodding there. Are you nodding that they are on the list, or are you nodding that they should be? Okay.
Yes.
Thanks. Okay,
Thanks.
so recommendation 3 will say to send the plan to all outside bodies mentioned in the plan's recommendations and to our MLA and MP. That's seconded, that amendment. All those in favor? That's carried. Okay, other discussion?
Yes, thank you. This is a question for the mayor. When this item was first introduced earlier in the meeting, it was discussed about the idea of bringing it to committee of the whole for a more full in discussion. And I was just curious, maybe if you could elaborate on that, to see where that type of unpacking might occur, because this is, it's an important document. There's a lot of content there, and it affects our strategic plan as well as some of our other grounding documents.
Well, I'm going to suggest a motion that recommends that all of the recommendations specific to the District of Sechelt be included in the current review of work plan for consideration by council and senior staff. So that might actually give us a chance to do that in a workshop along with the 100 other items there. But what I was thinking was, when I was reading it over the weekend, I could have discussed it for an hour. So I assume times 6, 7, and others that we could have unpacked it, because there's quite a bit there. But I think if we can get the recommendations into the work plan, then they'll be embedded in ways that we can actually bring them out and talk about different things. But if we want to refer this to the next committee of the whole, because it's not going to be a stale dated document, this is a document that's going to be alive for some time, we could certainly take that as a good recommendation.
Well, I think my interest in this one is just to make sure that we do have that discussion. I mean, this is prime time, regular council meeting. Many interested people watching this particular meeting. We don't want to give them too much time to wait. I just want to make sure council is ready to have that discussion. And I think, we really need to be prepared to discuss some of the key strategic things that are said here and internalize it.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit more depth than just a work plan. This is kind of long-range trajectory planning stuff that could have a large impact on Sechelt's future.
Yes, hopefully the second recommendation will ensure that it's reviewed by the Integrated Sustainability Community Plan, for example, and reviews of OCPs. But so I think we take your point. If councillors want it to come to a committee of the whole, that's easy enough to do. We don't need to right now, perhaps. Councillor Inkster.
Thank you. A lot of this work, as we know, over the last number of years and where Sechelt's been going has been done. This is just an additional good piece to this. In reference, I just wanted to point out something that's in reference to an earlier discussion that we had on a pulled item. If you look at, just quickly, because people can read the rest, won't take up too much time. It says policy implications. The district currently relies on the 2010 official community plan for policies associated with seniors. So that's in reference to an earlier item that was pulled and defeated. So people can read the rest, but that's why we were talking about it earlier, and that's why I mentioned some of the things that I did. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mueller is making a motion to refer to committee of the whole, seconded by several, but Councillor Lutz first. We have two on the floor, so let's deal with those.
Yeah.
Thank you. Any further discussion of the two motions? All those in favor? Now we have a motion from Councillor Mueller, seconded by Councillor Wright, that this be referred to the committee of the whole for further discussion. And I'll make that a reference for discussion because I don't want it to disappear from the table right now. Any discussion of that item? All those in favor? And if I can get one more recommendation on this, with all due respect to staff and others, I read the second and third recommendations, actually the second recommendation, as a classic, put this on the shelf and we'll think about it when we're doing our work recommendation. To be endorsed, yes, and then considered when reviewing and implementing. And I think that if we don't actually put it into the work plan, there's a number of action items in there that aren't just for policy. There's a number that are not just about thinking how the OCP should be adjusted. So I would look for a recommendation from councillors that all of the recommendations that are specific to the district of Sechelt be included in the current review of the work plan for consideration by council and senior staff. Thank you. And we can speak to that. I had Councillor Seegers and Wright moving that. So, and Councillor Mueller.
So can I just be clear about which particular sentences in the document you're referring to? Because there's a number of items. Is it the key findings?
No, there's key recommendations. They were in green in my other copy. And there's 43 of them, but only about 21 of them actually were recommendations for the district of Sechelt. And they were specific items for, some of them were specific for us to do. So I don't want them to just be thought about when we're coming through.
Yeah, thank you. I just wanted to be clear because there are a number of things highlighted and.
Yeah. And that's one reason it comes to committee of the whole, because there are some things that are not actually recommendations, but they're discussion points that we should raise and wonder, because that's what I thought when I was reading it. It's a very interesting report. Any further discussion on sending it to the work plan? All those in favor? That's carried. Anything else on the age-friendly community plan? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I had the pleasure of sitting at the seniors planning table with the group, and I want to compliment Allison. So, sorry, excuse me. Mayor Mellon mentioned something at the beginning. I just want to thank you for all your work. It's been a real privilege to work with you, and the product that you produced is top-notch. So thank you.
Yes. And I noticed I don't even know if it was a recommendation, but the request to consider a modestly supported seniors planning table. I read that again and thought of some things. So we'll, that's one that we won't just let fall off the table. I realize it did not get through the grant and aid process this year. There's a number of reasons for that. And we would still like it to be coast-wide, but the reality is it's serving a very important purpose for the district of Sechelt, in particular when we do not have a dedicated social planning function, which may take a while for the Sunshine Coast to move towards. There's going to be reluctance to add a social planner, but I think we need that as well. But we can, in the interim, make sure that other things are funded. Well, Councillor Ingston.
Well, I mean, I guess we'll come back to this, but we did have a community planner.
That was quite a while ago.
Yeah, well, 4 or 5 years, and they did those things, so, yeah.
Some of them.
Yeah.
Okay. Any further discussion on the age-friendly community plan? Moving on then to item, thank you very much for your patience being here too. Item 10.4, 2016 Climate Action Review Incentive Program, CARIP report. And this is for receipt. Councillor Seegers, Councillor Wright, all those in favor? Any discussion? Councillor Seegers. Sorry.
Thank you. Page 137, I believe then. The section titled 2016 Energy Generation Actions. Make sure I've got the right page. Corporate actions taken in 2016. It's saying capturing heat from income raw sewage. I think it's supposed to be incoming raw sewage. I think that's the only one I found.
There's so much money being spent in the WRC that it's creating heat.
Yes.
And we're using that. That's very good.
All right. That's it. Thank you.
I did notice on one of them where the page before that, what plans govern the implementation of climate mitigation in your community, that staff had indicated that the integrated community sustainability plan was in fact a yes. We don't have it yet, so I was kind of surprised at that. However, it is good that we're trying to move up to the second level of demonstrating progress and not just meeting the core requirements. So again, it's something we used to spend more time on and haven't recently. Any other discussion on on this plan? Okay. Moving then to item 11.1, councillors' reports. I'll start on my far right, if I may, with Councillor Lutz. Sorry.
I have nothing to report.
Will be quick. Councillor Mueller, anything to report?
No, other than our regular council work, there's nothing to report.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. I attended the SCRD Community Dialogue when it was held here in Sechelt. I had some questions about water because I've heard that, I've been hearing this rumor in the community that we couldn't build above a certain height in our community. So I went and talked to the water fellow about that, right, Mr. Crosby. And he said, yes, we have different zones. So we have a zone 1 that you can go from 0 to 60 meters from sea level, and then you have zone 2 from 60 to 120. So if we want to build above that, we will need to do some infrastructure upgrades. So that was interesting. I attended the mayor's lunch and watched our mayor answer the questions that were put forward to him. Along with a number of others here, I attended the intergovernmental meeting. It was hosted by the school district down in Sechelt, and we had a compliment from all the governments on the Sunshine Coast. Very well attended. It was a great opportunity to interact with the others and get their perspectives on some of the issues that we're all dealing with. Again, with some of the other councillors here, I attended the BC assessment workshop put on by the SCRD. And it's really interesting to see how BC assessment is starting to embrace some of the technologically more advanced items that are available to them. Things like they are using like Google Maps and drive-bys and such like that. GIS pictures to be able to determine the size of a house. And they're updating that throughout the province. So that's really nice to see. And then I was approached by TRAC for last week for Bike to Work Week. And they gave me the opportunity to try one of their electric bikes. And as some of you know, it's for me to get into downtown Sechelt is pretty much downhill. So that part was easy. But then once we got downtown, we drove around downtown a bit because they had to show me where all of the bike paths were and how they worked, etc., and where they didn't exist. But then we had to take the trail up past the high school. So the electric bike came in handy. I still didn't quite make it up, but it was good. And the bikes are amazing, so that was really nice. And I want to thank them for giving me that opportunity. And then with a couple of the other councillors here, we just attended the Habitat for Humanity AGM next door in between our previous meeting and this one. So that was my last couple of weeks. Thanks.
Thank you. And are there videos of the Bike to Work Week?
There's pictures.
There's pictures. Good. Electric bikes are great. And Councillor Wright.
Thank you, Your Worship. I also attended the Chamber of Commerce Mayor's Luncheon. That was entertaining. The questions were just so much fun. Intergovernmental meeting, Planning and Development Committee meeting, Public Works meeting. Went to the Davis Bay Community Association meeting and answered a few questions there. Attended the Youth Advisory Committee meeting for one of the other counselors who couldn't make it. And then, of course, the Habitat for Humanity annual general meeting. And then because there was no meeting for the District of Sechelt on the 31st of May, and because I was no longer the SCRD rep on June the 1st, I took the opportunity to spend 7 days with my daughter and 3 grandsons and had to build a 20 by 8 deck. I had to tear the old one down first, but anyway, it was an entertaining time. I had a good time. I think that concludes my report.
That's what visitors are for. Councillor Inkster.
Thanks. I just wanted to start by saying over the last couple of weeks, I've had the opportunity to try Cavfefe. And I just wanted to mention that it came with lots of hype, but it left something to be desired once tasted. Just wanted to then move into my report. I went to the mayor's lunch as well as some other council members. And there was a lot of questions there. The unfortunate part about the numbers of questions was it's hard to answer them substantively. So there's just, I hope next time they just stick to some themes, maybe 3 to 5 questions, and then we can, it's easier for the person answering them to get into those 3 to 5. It's just a lot of questions. I wanted to mention that I also was at the West Sechelt Association meeting, executive meeting, and because I think the West Sechelt's got about 3,000 residents now, and there's a lot of questions about development continuing, and I'm sure when that changes, the next representative will have to deal with some of those questions about development. And also they're still talking about budgeted items that they hope occur next year with some of the road and pedestrian developments. I was also at the BC Assessments presentation at the regional district. It was a good presentation. They answered a couple of my questions, which was helpful. And it was interesting to see the numbers of appeals and the actual small amount of actual appeal amounts. And it looked like they used a 10% adjustment to keep people happy. It just kind of looked like a formula they were using. And finally, I wanted to just mention that I just passed the mayor at the Girl Guide camp celebration. As he left, I arrived. I guess we were doing it in shifts. And they gave me a great tour. It was, I think it was her 3rd tour of the day, the gal that was doing it, and she marched me around the camp and showed me a lot of the buildings. One thing that I should mention that I think that the community should take more advantage of if they do it properly and under supervision is they have what, I don't know if you saw it, but it's sort of like a natural history museum. Did you see that building? Mm-hmm. Did you go in there?
No.
You didn't go in?
Not this time.
Okay, so I think the schools should go look. The classrooms in Sechelt or wherever should go look at what the material that they have in there. Just the skeletons and just some snake. They got a big python skin, and just the stuff that they have in there is amazing. You could put a class in there for 2 hours. So well done on them for their 90 years and all the things that they do with the guides, and the fact that they have some services and facilities they're offering to the community on an ongoing basis. That's my report. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And Councillor Shanks.
Yeah, just a small commentary. While there may be increases in technology with the BC Assessment Authority, it also produces many inaccuracies, I might add. Mm-hmm. When you're looking from above at a carport and a garage, they'll look the same, and various other things. And in terms of reduction of their appeals, I took the opportunity of appealing an assessment on behalf of a friend of mine, and there was a due date you had to have your appeals in and make them online. And when we got a response, the response said, sorry, there's no more appeals being allowed. So even though you sent a request in by the deadline, an email came back, sorry, we've accepted as many appeals as we can. And I remember a day when just in the Sunshine Coast alone, we probably had 600 to 700 appeals. This was many years ago, but the reality was there. So they're looking at ways to reduce the number of appeals. And I was most upset and sent a letter into the BC Assessment Authority indicating that was not the process many years ago. And if you lodge an appeal, you should at least be given the opportunity of being heard. Having said that, we'll move on to my report. Attended the Ferry Advisory Committee on behalf of the community. Attended with the Ferry Advisory Committee, a meeting with the BC Ferries. They're moving in a positive direction, but it's going to take some time, obviously. So they've contacted a consulting outfit to put forward or to hear from the public about suggestions for improving the service. They originally had 3 options in terms of different ferry schedules. That by no means was the number of variations that they would entertain. So their thrust now is to come up with a schedule whereby ferries can be on time. So if that means an extra 10 minutes, it means an extra 10 minutes. And so that's what they're working towards right now, is getting the ferries on time. And once they can get the ferries on time, the next move will be to construct an overhead walkway so that passengers can load on the upper deck rather than having to walk on before the traffic goes on. But that's a few years down the line. And a few other proposals are a few years down the line. So don't expect a new ferry on our system here for at least the next 6 to 8 years, because they're basically looking after the small commuter type ferries, Bowen Island, Salt Spring Island, that sort of thing. I too attended the Mayor's Luncheon, Chamber of Commerce Luncheon, and there are actually 11 questions, extremely detailed in content. And to the Mayor's credit, I thought he did an excellent job in answering all the questions. Different perspective. There was too many questions, there's no question about it. But they didn't get away with asking any sneaky questions for which there would be a 2-word answer. The Mayor went into considerable detail on each one. But I was disappointed in the attendance because there's probably only 30 or 40 people there, if that. Attended the SCRD and got sworn in as the new alternate director up there. Attended Habitat for Humanity, their annual general meeting. And this is an organization that many of us were around when the ground roots started with Habitat for Humanity. And it's just amazing what they've been able to do in a period of 10, 12 years, something like that. Just a truly amazing organization. I do have a couple of questions I'd like to talk with the CAO about in terms of some processes within our planning department, and also with respect to a lane issue specifically behind the post office, which has become a commercial lane with much more increased traffic than there ever has been in the past. All members of council will probably recall I sent out an email in terms of some of my concerns and the misconception, misinformation which is out in the community. And I think we should be doing something about that. And so I would solicit your support and perhaps giving me some feedback, and maybe we can, all of us come together in terms of how we're going to address that misinformation. It's such things as, the delay in the public hearing process, where we stand on Trellis at this point in time, why some of us voted the way we did in terms of not going down that lane, and 2 or 3 other specific items which are mentioned in that email. And I would just like to get some feedback, and then with the mayor's consent, perhaps we can move forward and do something about that publicly. Yeah. Okay. Well, thanks very much.
I'm not sure if we still do wraps.
No, but it
quarterly
might be an
or something,
opportunity.
but there might be time for a media outreach. Thank you for that report, and thank you to councillors for attending the Chamber of Commerce's Mayor's Luncheon. Got it out of a breakfast into midday, and if councillors hadn't attended, there would be even fewer people there, so thank you for that. And just in terms of the last comment by Councillor Shanks, there were a number of questions posed by the Chamber of Commerce which were in fact based on false, misleading information. It was just unbelievable. People picking stuff up from wherever and saying, oh, well, then what about this? Well, sorry, we don't know about that because it doesn't exist. Even the rescinding of the three projects that had to go from third reading back to public hearing, totally misunderstood and had the wrong projects. So they didn't know what they were talking about. Financial statements that were just totally pulled out of the air. So if the business leaders of our community are misinformed about the work that council's doing, we have a really serious problem in communications and in media work. Really serious problem. Unless there's intentional misinformation going out there, and we know there are some sources of intentional misinformation, but we have to do a much better job of being clear and correcting issues that come forward. So we may have to see what we can do on that. I'd just like to mention a few things that I was at. It seemed to be a weekend for youth projects. On Friday, Lieutenant Governor Guichon was in on the Sunshine Coast. She was actually here for a weekend event with her Youth in Leadership program, but she came to Kinnikinnick School on Friday morning, so we had a chance to welcome her and interact with her as she interacted with the students there. On Saturday morning, it was the annual review for the for the Seaforth Highlanders Army Cadets. On Sunday, it was the annual review and parade for the Air Cadets, the Skookumchuck Squadron. That was down, they use our airport, but it was down in Gibson's. And in between was the 90th anniversary party for Camp Olav, which means it's been here a lot longer than most of the community or others. And one woman I spoke to there, who I've actually met at the 75th anniversary, came first in 1947 as an 8-year-old. She's been there for 70 years, coming back and forth. And we know any number of people who came to the Sunshine Coast first as guides or brownies to Camp Olav, and then said, oh, their families came later just to see where they'd visited, and they've lived and bought and purchased here. Some waited till retirement, some earlier. So it's an amazing presence on the coast, and I think something worthy of our support, which I told them in my remarks. And that would conclude my report. And we'd move now for a moment to the SCRD board report, which is from our last representative director. Right.
No, thank you, Your Worship. Attended the infrastructure committee meeting, corporate admin committee meeting, and a board meeting. Attended the community dialogue by the regional district, and the community dialogue was just a wealth of information for people if they had taken the opportunity to attend. Unfortunately, most of them, as I talked to other directors, were very poorly attended. And in Sechelt, we had around 15, maybe 20 people that showed up to that. And there was at least 2 councillors, maybe 3, plus the mayor there. So if you subtract them from that number, the number gets pretty thin. Anyway, also attended that BC assessment workshop, and afterwards I spoke to the gentleman, and I said, it's very interesting. You have this camera that goes by, and you drive by the street, it looks over your fence. So I said, I want to know how you assess my property. My driveway is 152 feet long, and it's got a curve in it. You can't even see the house from the street. We had a kind of an interesting conversation. The last thing that I had to do at the regional district is I had to attend a meeting. I had to fill out a form on the evaluation of the CAO and attend the meeting that compiled all that information on that evaluation. And that was a fun time. 2 reports of interest would be the BC transit timeline for process and documentation, and I'll pass that on to our CAO for his information and other councillors if they want to access it. This will be my last regional district report, and I want to thank council for the opportunity to serve on the regional district. It was a fun time. I enjoyed it. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report as well. And moving on to the item 12.1, which is release of items, one item from closed meeting. Councillor to move the release of that one recommendation, which is on the Blackcomb Helicopters project at Sechelt Airport. Councillor Seegers, thank you. And the entire recommendation, resolutions, yeah. Oh, okay. The following resolutions be confirmed. 1, 2, and 3. Thank you, Councillor Seegers. Councillor Shanks, all those in favor? And actually, thank you for staff for helping out on that Habitat for Humanity stalemate. It's good that they're through. And a motion to receive the public council correspondence. Thank you, Councillor Lutz, Councillor Seegers. All those in favor? Any of those items people would like to draw attention to? Councillor Seegers.
Thank you. The number 3 on World Oceans Day, I just noticed in the correspondence there that they indicate that on their website, they actually will list any events in your city or town. So we have to let them know that they have a page for each province and territory. So perhaps our event that's happening on Saturday could be forwarded and included in their list.
It already has been.
Perfect, thank you. And the Sechelt Library Funding Agreement letter. I believe we'll have some action by staff to move that forward. And then I just wanted to bring attention to the Sunshine Coast Hospice Society events that they have. They're raising money, but it's also bringing their issues around grieving and care, palliative care, etc., to the community, to the wider community. That's all. Thank you.
Okay, and I would not want to draw attention to it, but again, we want to look at the correspondence that comes here. There was one item there that in fact was not written to mayor or council and contains private information on the individual that she may or may not have wanted in the public domain. It was sent information and not to mayor and council. So we want to continue to look at this material and say what's appropriate for mayor and council and public discussion and what isn't. I'll discuss that with you afterwards. Okay. And then I'd look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you. Councillor Shanks, Councillor Lutz, all those in favor? It's 8:15. Seemed longer than it was. Any comments on the proceedings tonight or questions from staff, public, or others? And I see it's been a long time since the media actually asked something at the end of our meeting, so I'm glad we baffled you in some way that you actually had to ask a question.
Recommendation about habitat that came out of this meeting, what risk habitat?
Oh, the risk would be that when their permit does come before council,